Ratio, proportion, and percent. This lesson is going to review ratio, proportion, and percent and how they are used on the ACT college entrance exam. I'm going to explain the meaning of ratio, proportion, and percent, then take a look at how to write a proportion 3 different ways. Now let's head over to the classroom to review ratio, proportion, and percent. First thing, what is a ratio? Ratio is nothing more than, technically they call it a comparison of 2 numbers. One word definition of ratio, fraction. It's that easy. Percent, what does it mean? It means per 100. Oh, it's kind of like a ratio. But we can write a ratio as a percent by simply changing a ratio, a fraction, to a decimal, and then change that decimal representation to a percent. An example. 3/4 equals 0.75. And if you remember how to change a decimal to a percent, you just move it 2 places to the right. So it's going to give you 75%. Let's make sure we understand percent, though. So let's kind of work backwards. What if I gave you 75%? How would I go about writing that as a fraction now? Well, 75%. Percent, don't forget, that means per 100. So what you're going to do with that 75 is you're going to put it over 100. The word per means divide. So we're going to write it as 75 over 100. And if you know us math people, we like to reduce things, and I can think of a number that goes in the top part. 25 goes in 75 3 times. 25 goes in 100 4 times. 3/4. Let's see, that's a common fraction. 0.75. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how ratios and percents work together and how you can write one in terms of the other very easily. Now, the next one I want to spend some time on. That's called proportion. What is a proportion? Technically, it is 2 ratios equal to each other. 2 fractions equal to each other. An example of proportion. 2/3 equals 4/6. 2 ratios, 2 fractions equal to each other. That's what a proportion is. Now, where proportions are used a lot of times is there's one of these numbers missing. And how do you solve a proportion? If you remember, when you have a proportion, you solve by cross multiplying. So if you had 2/3 equals some variable x, that's our favorite variable, over 6. And you wanted to figure out this question is asking you to solve for x. You've got to find x. Cross multiply. So that means you're going to take the 3 times the x. That's what they mean by cross. You're going to make a diagonal this way and this way. So it's you're making a cross when you multiply. So you're going to get 3x equals 2 times 6. So you get 3x equals 12. And if you remember how to solve for x, all you have to do now is divide by the coefficient, which is 3 in this case. So x would be 12 divided by 3, which is 4, which is what we showed here. So that's how you solve a proportion. Now what I want to show you is how to write the same proportion 3 different ways, and how would it be beneficial to know how to do that. So let me give you a basic proportion with all variables. Say I gave you A over B is equal to C over D. Now if you cross multiplied, you would get AD equals BC when you cross multiply. Now let me show you 3 ways to rewrite this given proportion. 1. What you could do is you could switch diagonally the A and D. So it would look like you put the D here and the A here. Leave the B and C alone. If you cross multiply, you're going to get AD equals BC. You still get the original equation. Well, why would that be beneficial? Well, what if you had this situation? 5 over 1 equals 10 over x. Well, if you know that you're allowed to switch diagonally, and I'm going to illustrate the switch like we did here, switch the 5 and the x. Leave the 1 and 10 alone. What's x divided by 1? X. What's 10 divided by 5? 2. You got x by itself. You just solve for x really quick that way. So that's one situation. Okay, the second way to write the same proportion. Let's leave the A and D alone, and let's switch the B and C. If you multiply, cross multiply, you take A times D, you get AD, and you multiply the other one, you get BC. You still get the same equation when you cross multiply. So let me show you an example of this situation. 12 over x equals 4 over 1. You can switch the x and the 4. So let's do that. Leave the 12 and 1 alone. On the right side, what's x divided by 1? X. What's 12 divided by 4? 3. You just solve for x really quick by just moving diagonally. Now the third one I think is the coolest one and the most practical. What you could do is you could flip both fractions. So the A over B becomes B over A. And then the C over D becomes D over C. If you cross multiply, let's do that, AD equals BC. You still get the same cross product. So it's legal. We're allowed to do this. Let me show you an example in which this will be beneficial. If you have 1 over x equals 5 over 20. You got 1 over x, but you need x. All we had to do was flip 1 over x, we would get x over 1. Let's do that. But if you do it to the left side, you've got to do it to the right. That's basically what this is saying. So you're going to get 20 over 5. X over 1, that's x. Equals 20 divided by 5, which is 4. In review, proportions can be written 3 different ways. And reviewing ratio, proportion, and percent will serve you well when reviewing for the ACT.